Before we continue, please do subscribe to my channel.
It was an ordinary morning at Sunrise Diner, the kind of morning where the clink of forks, the hiss of bacon on the griddle, and the soft hum of chatter created a rhythm Linda Mae Carter had memorized over the years. She'd been working here for more than 3 decades, pouring coffee, offering warm smiles, and sharing bits of her heart with customers she came to know like family. But that day, the one that would eventually make headlines, change lives, and wake up the whole town, began with a breeze and a bell. Ding! The front door opened just after 7 a.m., and Linda looked up from behind the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. Her heart paused for a beat. It wasn't unusual to see a teenager walk in, but this one felt different. He was alone. Young. Maybe 14 or 15. Pale. Slim. And shoulders that looked too heavy for someone his age. He didn't speak, just walked quietly to a corner booth and sat down, hands in his hoodie pockets, staring at the menu but not really reading it. Linda watched him for a moment, then grabbed a clean mug and walked over. "Morning, sweetheart," she said softly, with a warmth only someone like Linda could offer. "Coffee or cocoa?" He looked up. Their eyes met for the first time. There was something hollow in his gaze, like he hadn't been seen in a long time. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't expect to be. "Cocoa," he said after a pause, voice soft, dry, like it hadn't been used in days.
Before we continue, please do subscribe to my channel. You got it? Linda returned with the steaming mug and a little smiley face drawn in whipped cream on top. She placed it gently in front of him and set down a menu, though she had a feeling he wouldn't order much. "You take your time, sugar," she said. The boy just nodded. That was the first time he came in. He didn't say much, didn't eat much either. Just sipped the cocoa, stared out the window, and disappeared without a sound. But he came back the next day, and the day after that, same time, same booth, same silence. Linda started bringing him toast, just plain buttered toast, without asking. He'd always give her a tiny nod of thanks. Nothing more. The other waitresses at the diner noticed too. "Who's the ghost in booth 6? Asked Tammy one morning, peering over Linda's shoulder. "He even got a name?" "Nope," Linda replied. "Not yet. He'll tell me when he's ready." Tammy raised a brow. "You got a soft spot for strays, don't you?" Linda just smiled and refilled the boy's mug with more cocoa. Truth was, she did have a soft spot. Not just for strays, but for quiet ones. It's for the forgotten ones, the ones the world stopped looking at. She didn't press him. Never asked why he was alone. Never asked where his parents were. But she noticed the way he flinched every time. The door opened. The way his eyes flickered to the exit like he was calculating an escape. She started sneaking extra things onto his plate. Eggs one day, bacon another. He never asked for them, but never complained either. And he never left food behind. That meant more to her than he probably realized. By the end of the second week, Linda had named him in her head, the quiet one. She still didn't know his name. But something about him made her feel protective, like he was one strong breeze away from vanishing altogether. One morning, a group of loud teenage boys came in, all swagger and noise. They laughed, elbowed each other, called Linda ma'am in that teasing tone, only boys who thought they were men used. The quiet one had just walked in. The usual hoodie up, shoulders hunched. One of the loud boys muttered something under his breath and chuckled. Linda couldn't hear it, but she saw the way the quiet one froze. Just for a second, she stepped in front of the boys' table like a shield and shot them a glare. Only a seasoned waitress and mother of Utu could deliver. "This ain't a place for ugly behavior," just said coolly. "Either show some respect or take your breakfast somewhere else." They quieted instantly. The boy who'd muttered something glanced away. No apology, but no more remarks either. Linda walked back to the kitchen, hands trembling a little, not from fear, but from something deeper. Anger, maybe, or worry. She had no idea what the boy had been through, but she knew what it looked like to feel unsafe. She wouldn't let her diner, her space, become another corner of the world that made him feel that way. Later that morning, something unexpected happened. As she was clearing the table, she found a small piece of paper under the boy's cocoa mug. It was folded, deliberate. She opened it. 3 words, written in small, careful handwriting. "Thank you, Linda." She stared at it for a long time. Her chest swelled with something warm and sad and powerful all at once. He knew her name. She pressed the note to her chest, blinked back a tear, and tucked it into her apron pocket like it was treasure. From that day forward, it wasn't just about cocoa and toast anymore. By the end of the month, she started calling him kiddo, and one morning he actually smiled. Just for a second, but it was real. And then one day, he didn't come. Not at 7 o'clock. Not at all. Linda checked the booth, waited, looked at the door every time the bell rang, but nothing. And when he didn't show up the next day either, something inside her twisted. That boy, that quiet, broken boy, had become a part of her mornings, a part of her heart. So she did something she hadn't done in years. She asked for a favor. Linda visited the school counselor, the local police station, and even the social worker's office. She described him the best she could, gave a general age, the way he looked, the clothes he wore. They all nodded politely, took notes, but no one knew him. No one had seen him. It was like he didn't exist. Until one morning, 4 black SUVs pulled up outside the diner. Dark windows, government plates, and then the door burst open. Linda's coffee pot shattered on the floor the next morning. Mae Carter stood at the edge of her living room, 2 garbage bags full of old memories at her feet. The house was quiet, eerily so. Her children were grown. The phone barely rang anymore. And now the diner, her lifeline, felt like it was slipping out of her grasp too. But the quiet didn't scare her. She'd faced worse. It was what came after the quiet that always hurt. The voices in her head that whispered doubts when no one else was there to talk her down. She looked down the basement stairs, holding the railing like she was preparing to enter another world. "I guess this is home now," she muttered to herself, switching off the main lights upstairs and descending, one slow step at a time. The basement was musty, dimly lit, and cluttered, with boxes full of old Christmas ornaments, outgrown toys, and her late husband's forgotten tools. A single pull-chain bulb flickered in the center. She took a deep breath. "All right, Linda. Let's clean this up before it swallows you whole." It took the better part of 3 hours, but by the time the clock struck 11:45 a.m., Linda had cleared out a little corner. She laid an old rug over the concrete, placed a twin mattress on some cinder blocks, and stacked a few milk crates to make a makeshift shelf for her folded clothes. There was no proper door, just a curtain she'd pinned up across the open doorway. Privacy wasn't the goal. Survival was. Linda wiped the sweat from her brow and sighed. "Not bad for a woman pushing 63, she said aloud, forcing a smile she didn't really feel. Just as she sat down on the mattress, her phone buzzed on the nearby crate. "Okay." A message from Carla, the diner's owner. "Carla. Hey, hun. Slow morning. Won't need you till the dinner rush. Come in at 4. Linda stared at the message. Number. Mention of the boy from yesterday. No explanation. Just business as usual, she typed back. Linda. Got it. See you then. She put the phone down and leaned back, staring up at the ceiling joists above her. Who was that boy? Why did everyone freeze when he asked for the chef? And why hadn't anyone told her anything? But the silence was unbroken, so she did what she always did, push the questions aside and got back to work. At 4 p.m. sharp, Linda was back at Pinebrook Diner, tying her apron behind her back, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun. She stepped through the swinging kitchen door, past the smell of sizzling onions and frying oil. Carla was behind the counter, pretending to organize the pie display. Linda approached. "Evenin', Carla." Carla jumped a bit, as if caught off guard. "Oh, hey Linda. You sleep okay?" Linda raised an eyebrow. "Sure, in a basement full of ghosts and broken dreams, but I made it work." Carla forced a chuckle. That's our Linda, tough as nails. A moment of silence hung between them before Linda broke it. "You gonna tell me what happened yesterday? With that boy?" Carla's eyes darted as if checking to see who might be listening. She leaned in. "He came back this morning." Linda blinked. "He did." "Didn't say much. Just sat at the same booth. Ordered toast. Plain, left $100 bill on the table. Didn't want change." Linda felt a chill ripple up her arms. "Call the cops?" "No, you don't understand," Carla whispered. "He's not in trouble. He's protected. You remember Mike, the cook from 2 years ago?" Linda nodded. Slowly. "The one who disappeared?" Carla nodded grimly. "Yeah, that kid was here the day Mike vanished. Sat in the same booth, same quiet stare. Next day Mike was gone. Just gone. No goodbye. No call. Nothing." Linda felt her breath hitch. "Are you saying he's, what, a ghost? A curse?" "I don't know, but you saw it." Everyone froze. "No one knows what he wants. But if he asks for you, ... She lowered her voice even more. ... Just be careful." The dinner rush came in waves: families, tired truckers, the regulars with their usual orders. Linda moved through it all like muscle memory. Smile, take order, pour coffee, crack a joke, clear plates. But by 7:15 the diner fell into an odd lull. Quiet, too quiet for a Friday night. And then he walked in. Same brown jacket, same tooth and face, same solemn, hollow eyes. Linda was carrying a plate of meatloaf when she saw him take his CTS. The same booth. She froze. Not like yesterday's dramatic stop, but a subtle tightening in her chest, like the air had shifted. The boy looked up. Their eyes met. He raised a hand, not to wave, not to call for a menu, just ... A gesture of recognition. Linda placed the plate on her tray station and walked over slowly, like her body was moving on instinct. "Hey there," she said, keeping her tone gentle. "You came back." Didn't smile, but his head tilted, curious. "You moved," he said softly. Linda blinked. "Excuse me, you're not upstairs anymore." "You're in the basement now." Her heart skipped. "How do you know that?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he looked past her to the kitchen. "Can I meet the chef tonight?" Linda's breath caught. There was no chef tonight. Just old Paul on grill duty and Mel cleaning dishes. She cleared her throat. We don't have a chef tonight." The boy looked back at her, disappointed but not surprised. "That's okay. I wanted to talk to you anyway." "Me?" He nodded. "You're kind. You looked me in the eye. That matters more than you know." Linda felt her knees grow weak. She sat down across from him without even thinking. "Who are you?" He looked out the window, watching the flicker of a street lamp. "I'm someone who listens. That's all. People don't really see each other anymore, but you do. You noticed me." Linda opened her mouth to speak, but the words refused to come. The boy turned back to her, something like a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Do you believe in second chances, Miss Linda?" she whispered. "I don't know anymore." He nodded. "Well, maybe it's time you did." And with that, he stood, placed a folded piece of paper on the table, walked out into the night. Linda stared at the note, heart pounding. With trembling hands, she unfolded it. It simply read, "Tomorrow, bring your apron to booth 5. Don't be late." The basement was cold, Not just in temperature, but in spirit. I had tried to convince myself that this was just a temporary setback, a minor chapter in a longer, more dignified story. But as days passed, the silence began to speak louder than I ever anticipated. Linda Mae Carter, once known for her smile behind the counter, her unwavering rhythm between refills and receipts. Now known only to the boiler in the corner and the soft creak of water pipes above, I kept myself busy in the mornings, organizing. Things no one would see, scrubbing corners of the small living space I'd made for myself. It gave me the illusion of control. But afternoons were different. They dragged, they whispered, and the boy hadn't returned. Each day I told myself maybe he was out of town or had found another diner. But by the fourth morning, I stopped glancing up at every shadow passing the basement window. The feeling of rejection was worse than I'd anticipated. And yet I wasn't sure why I was hurt so deeply. He was just a quiet boy with a sad face and a fork that barely moved. But he was there when he was around. The world above didn't feel so closed off. Sometimes I'd take his old receipt from the counter drawer, the one with the crayon mark. Never rang him up for the meals he didn't finish, but I kept the slip. A silly memento for a woman who should know better. I heard a knock above, muffled, faint. I froze. Then came the hurried footsteps. Jenny's voice, a soft coming, echoing through the diner above. I pressed my ear closer to the ceiling. Customers were rare these days. Curious, I climbed up the narrow stairwell and peeked from the hallway that separated the back kitchen from the front. Just in time to see a woman not more than 30 placing a large envelope on the counter. "Please give this to her," she said quietly. "It's from my brother." Jenny looked puzzled but nodded. "Sure. Wait, are you?" But the woman was already halfway out the door, her long black coat sweeping behind her like a secret. Jenny turned and noticed me standing there. "Linda," she said slowly, holding out the envelope. "I think it's from him." My fingers trembled as I took it. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a short handwritten note on yellow paper, folded twice, and a single photograph. The note read, "Ms. Carter, I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye. I didn't know how. You reminded me what kindness felt like. It's not something I get often. I don't know why you were kind to me, but it made something heavy inside me feel a little lighter. I'm staying with my sister now. Things aren't perfect, but I'm trying. She found me a program. They say it might help. Please don't think I forgot about the eggs in the pie. I remember everything. I left something behind by accident. In the booth under the seat, it's not much, but it's yours now. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible." I pressed the letter to my chest. My knees wobbled, and I sat down at the end booth without a word. Jenny stood frozen for a moment, then stepped away, giving me space. I turned over the photograph. It was an old picture, clearly taken with a shaky hand. The boy, younger, maybe 8 or 9, sitting beside a man who looked too stiff to be a father. The boy was smiling in it awkwardly, uncomfortably. I stood up and moved to the booth he always sat in. Reaching under the seat, I felt around the wooden frame until my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic, taped up beneath the cushion. It was a tiny gold key, like the kind that might open a box or a drawer. Taped beside it was a folded napkin with one word written in red crayon. "For you." I turned the key over in my hand, confused, curious, and overwhelmed. I didn't know what it opened, but something told me it wasn't meant to unlock anything literal. The heaviness in my chest came from more than just the letter. It came from realizing I had made a difference, however small, in someone's life when I felt like mine had stopped mattering. I had spent so much time carrying guilt about the daughter I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. About the marriage I let dissolve like sugar in bitter coffee. About my back that ached when I stood too long. About my worth thinning with every passing year. But maybe, just maybe, the boy had seen something in me that I had long forgotten to see in myself. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I cooked. Not just anything. I cooked his plate. 2 eggs, barely touched. A slice of pie. And I ate it. Slowly, gratefully, at his booth. With the key resting next to the salt shaker and the letter in my apron pocket. Above me, the fluorescent lights buzzed and the clock ticked toward closing. But in my heart, something had opened. Maybe the basement wasn't where I was starting over. Maybe it was the booth. Maybe the key had. It's already unlocked something inside me. The first time I laughed in that basement, it startled me. It came one evening while folding laundry, yes. Even after everything, I still had to fold laundry. My youngest, Amy, was sitting on the old futon, her feet barely touching the floor, swinging them as she held up one of her brother's socks like it was a puppet. "Mom, this sock smells like it fought a dragon and lost," she said, crinkling her nose. I let out a short laugh. Then it grew louder, and before I knew it, I was laughing so hard, I had to sit down on the cold concrete floor. Amy joined in, her tiny shoulders shaking as she dropped the sock and crawled toward me. We hugged, both, giggling like we had just heard the best joke in the world. That moment cracked something open in me. We were still in a basement, still with one window that barely let in sunlight, still sharing a single plug-in heater and using cardboard boxes as dressers. But in that moment, we found something better than comfort. We found each other again. The kids began settling into the new rhythm of life quicker than I had imagined. I think children, in their own miraculous way, learn to adapt before adults do. They find wonder in places we would overlook. To them, the basement wasn't a failure. It was a fort. "Can we hang up fairy lights?" Emma asked one evening. I had no money for fairy lights, but I did find an old set of holiday string lights in the storage closet upstairs that Miss Jenkins let me dig through. We strung them across the pipes, running overhead, and when we turned them on, the basement glowed with a warm, magical light. It wasn't just light, it was hope in bulbs. "Look, Mommy, it's like we're in a movie," Amy whispered, wide-eyed. Emma made it her mission to organize the space. She taped up drawings on the cement walls, brought in thrifted rugs from Miss Jenkins's donations pile, and created little zones, one for reading, one for toys, and one corner with a plastic mirror where she brushed her sister's hair every morning. I watched them rediscover joy in little things, sharing a single cup of hot chocolate on a chilly evening, giggling over mismatched socks, building Lego castles that stretched from one end of the room to the other, and slowly, I began rediscovering myself too. One afternoon, I sat with an open notebook and a half-functioning pen Miss Jenkins gave me. I hadn't written in years, not since college, when I thought I might become a writer. Life had other plans. But now, when the girls were at school, and I had an hour before my cleaning shift, I started jotting things down. Not big things, it's just small notes, gratitudes, observations. Amy's laughter today sounded like wind chimes.
Ah!
Emma braided my hair before school and said, "You look like a queen. Basement smells like lemon from the cleaner, but it's better than mildew." I'm still here. Some days those small scribbles were the only thing reminding me I was doing okay. Not thriving maybe, but not drowning either. Miss Jenkins became more than a landlady. She started dropping by in the evenings, not intrusively, just with little things. A tray of warm cookies, an old radio she wasn't using, a pair of gloves when the cold crept in. She never pitied us. That's what I appreciated the most. Instead, she always said, "You're stronger than you think, honey." One night I asked her why she was helping us so much. She sat on the edge of the futon, tugging at the ends of her cardigan. "Because someone once helped me, and I promised." I'd pass it on. I didn't press for details. That was enough. Her kindness wasn't charity, it was legacy. I started working extra hours at the diner. The manager, Marcia, noticed my effort and began giving me morning prep shifts. It paid a little more and came with a perk, the occasional leftover pastry or unsold sandwich. I brought them home like treasure. One day, Emma whispered, "We're rich in muffins." I smiled. We weren't rich, but we were rich in something else. One snowy Friday, the girls returned from school with flushed cheeks and glittering eyes. "Mom, you'll never guess," Amy squealed, dropping her backpack. "What happened? Mrs. Danner is going to let us sing at the winter assembly," Emma said, pulling out a crumpled paper. "We're doing this little light of mine." I looked at their excitement and swallowed the lump in my throat. I didn't have the heart to tell them I had no way of getting time off to attend. That Night I sat on the floor while they practiced. Amy sang off-key, and Emma kept starting over every time she messed up a lyric. But they were glowing, my little lights. My miracle. By December's end, we had spent 2 months in the basement. It still wasn't home, but it no longer felt like exile. It felt like the start of something. One evening, as I tucked Amy into her cot, she looked up at me. "Mommy, is this our forever house?" I paused, brushing her hair off her forehead. "No. Sweet pea, just our for now house." "Okay," she whispered. "But I like it. It's cozy." I nodded, kissed her cheek, and turned off the light. In the quiet that followed, I realized something profound. Maybe we couldn't control when life knocked us down. Maybe we couldn't even control where we landed, but we could control how we stood back up and who we became along the way. Because joy doesn't wait for perfect. It sneaks into the cracks. It lives in little things. It's in fairy lights and hand-me-down blankets and peanut butter sandwiches made with love. And sometimes starting over doesn't look like a grand gesture. Sometimes it looks like a warm basement with 3 people doing their best. And right now, that was more than enough. I'll never forget the morning I truly hit bottom. It started with a letter. A plain white envelope slid under the basement door. No stamp, just a name scrawled across the front in thick black ink. Linda, the way it sat there, like it had something terrible to say, made my chest feel tight before I even picked it up. Was from the landlord. Due to unresolved maintenance issues and inability to pay rent for 2 consecutive months, we regret to inform you that your tenancy will be terminated within 14 days. I stopped reading. The words blurred as my vision went watery. I sat on the cold basement step, the letter limp in my hand, and stared at the cracked wall for what must have been 20 minutes. I wasn't just losing my job or my money, now I was losing shelter, and I had no one to call. No family, no backup plan, no savings. I had always prided myself on being independent, strong, the kind of woman who didn't need saving. But in that moment, I felt small, like a speck of dust the world had forgotten. Later that day, I walked to the diner. Not to work, it was my day off, but because I didn't know where else to go. The rhythm of the place, the smell of coffee and grease, even the low hum of conversations, something about it made me feel less invisible. "Linda, you okay?" asked Maria, one of the waitresses. She was wiping down the counter, her tone casual but eyes sharp. I nodded too fast. "Just here for some pie." She didn't believe me, but she let it go. I sat at the corner booth, the one where the quiet boy used to sit. But he hadn't been in for days. No trace, no goodbye, just gone. And somehow, that made everything worse. For weeks I had made up stories about him in my head. Maybe he was the son of someone powerful. Maybe he was a runaway from something dark. Maybe he was just lonely like me. But now, without him, the basement felt emptier, the silence heavier. I got back home that evening to find water leaking from the ceiling. A rusted pipe had finally given out. I grabbed a pot and placed it under the steady drip, then slumped onto the mattress on the floor, knees hugged to my chest. It was then that the weight of everything pressed down on me. I started thinking of all the choices that led me here, the times I said no to help because I didn't want to be a burden, the times I swallowed my pride, and then the times I choked on it. I thought about my ex-husband, how we divorced without ever truly yelling, just a quiet growing apart like vines unwrapping from a shared post. Lost touch with, the calls I didn't return, the birthdays I forgot, and in that tiny, damn basement, I began to sob. Not the kind of crying that's soft and therapeutic. This was ugly, primal, chest-striking grief. The kind you do when you're not sure if you'll ever feel light again. The kind where the silence afterward is louder than your own screams. And in that stillness, something broke open. Not my spirit, but my resistance. I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I couldn't keep being the woman who held it together just for the sake of appearances. I needed help the next morning. I called the women's shelter downtown. I stammered through my story, half expecting them to judge me, to tell me I was too late, too old, to something. But instead, the voice on the other end was warm. "We have temporary housing available," she said. "You're not alone, Linda." Alone, it felt like the first ray of sunlight cracking through a storm cloud that same day. I took my few belongings just to bags and walked away from the basement. I looked back once, at the crooked little window near the ceiling, and whispered, "Thank you for holding me, even when I was broken." I moved into the shelter later that evening. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean, safe, a shared space with other women, each carrying their own stories, their own losses and victories. That night, lying on a real bed in a room with soft sheets and a working lamp, I didn't cry. I breathed. It wasn't over yet. I was still jobless, still scared, still uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, I'd stopped falling. Rock bottom wasn't the end. It was the place I finally found the strength to rise that night. As I sat on the edge of my mattress in the basement, the glow from my tiny bedside lamp seemed warmer than usual. It wasn't much, just a small bulb hanging from a wire taped to the cement wall. But tonight it felt like a candle flickering inside me. Maybe it was the way Dad had looked at me before heading off to his night shift. He didn't say anything, but his eyes had softened. Just a little. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but maybe. It was recognition that I was still trying, that I hadn't given up. I pulled my threadbare blanket over my legs and reached for my journal. It had become a quiet companion, not filled with poetry or deep thoughts, just little notes, reminders of progress. Today's entry was short. Did the dishes. Didn't argue with Mom. Watched a squirrel eat a cracker outside. Cleaned the oil spot in the garage. Applied for 2 jobs. That last line gave me pause. I'd walked to the library earlier that afternoon and used one of the public computers to apply for a job at a grocery store and another at a local pizza place. I had no idea if they'd call me back, but it felt purposeful. I wasn't just existing today. I had moved, and maybe that's all hope was. Movement. A tiny step forward. The next morning started slowly. Mom had already left for her part-time shift at the salon, and Dad was probably asleep after his night shift. I tiptoed upstairs, made myself toast, and stared out the kitchen window as the sky turned from pink to blue. Then the landline rang. We still had one of those mounted on the wall with a curly cord and buttons that clicked. I hesitated before picking it up. Double quotes, "Hello? Hi. Is this, Aiden?" Next. "This is Julie from Gus's Pizza. You applied?" Yesterday, my heart leaped. Yes, I did. "Can you come in for a trial shift this evening?" 5 to 9? I swallowed. "Absolutely. I'll be there." She chuckled. "Great. Black shirt, jeans. See you then." I hung up and stood frozen in the kitchen for a moment. My first real opportunity, my first chance to contribute, to prove to myself and to them that I could still be someone at 4:30 p.m. I stood in front of the mirror in the basement. The only black shirt I had was slightly faded, and my jeans had a tear near the back pocket. Still, I did what I could. Cleaned my sneakers with a toothbrush, tucked my shirt in, and tried to comb my hair into something resembling presentable. I told Dad as I passed him on the couch. He grunted but didn't look away from the TV again. Not approval. But not resistance either. At 4:45, I was at Gus's. It was small. Just 8 tables, a counter, and a kitchen that smelled like garlic, yeast, and hot tomato sauce. Julie greeted me with a brisk smile and handed me an apron. "You'll be helping with dishes and some delivery prep. If you make it through the night, we'll talk shifts." "Yes, ma'am," I said. I hadn't said those words in years. The shift was hard. Hot, loud, non-stop. Orders flying in, dishes piling up, Julie barking instructions. Delivery guy named Mike who kept cracking jokes and calling me rookie. But I didn't stop moving. I scrubbed trays, folded boxes, wiped down counters. My arms ached and my back screamed. But something inside me felt ... alive. For the first time in months, maybe longer. Halfway through the night, Julie handed me a slice of pepperoni. "Pepperoni. On the house," she said, You're doing better than half the kids I've hired this month. I took it with a nod, too tired to respond properly. My throat was dry, but my eyes were wet. At the end of the shift, she handed me a folded slip of paper. What's this? $20 in the schedule? You're on again Thursday and Saturday? I stood there stunned. Wait, I got the job? Julie smirked. Kid, you showed up, worked hard, and didn't whine. That's gold these days. I walked home with a spring in my step. It was past 9:30 and the air was cool. The stars were out clear, scattered. Jewels in a dark sky, and I couldn't stop smiling. Not a big, goofy grin. It's just a small, steady curve that warmed my cheeks. When I got home, I opened the door quietly and tiptoed down to the basement. I unfolded the schedule and taped it to the wall above my mattress like it was a certificate. Then, added to my journal, got hired, worked a full shift, didn't screw it up, ate pizza. Felt proud. That last line sat on the page like a flame. Too. Days later, Mom noticed. She walked into the basement while I was folding laundry I had offered to do. You cleaned down here? She asked, looking around at the slightly tidier chaos. Yeah, I figured it could use it. She nodded slowly, arms crossed. You working again tonight? Yeah, I said. Julie gave me a couple shifts a week, Gus's Pizza. She didn't respond right away. Just nodded again, and then, before leaving, she said something I hadn't heard from her in months. Good, keep at it. And it wasn't love, it wasn't a hug, but it was hope. Real, solid, flickering hope. That weekend, I used part of my first pay to buy Mom her favorite brand of tea. I left it on the kitchen counter with a sticky note. Thanks for not giving up on me. Aiden. When I came home that night, the box was gone. And there was a slice of warm lasagna waiting on the table. Maybe we were all healing, slowly. Together, and maybe flickers were all we needed to find. Our way back to the light. It started with a knock. Not the kind of knock you hear every day. This one was soft, hesitant, as if the person on the other side wasn't sure whether they were welcome. I had just finished folding the last of Mama's old sweaters, ones that still held her scent. Lavender and faintly of cornbread when the sound echoed in the quiet. I walked to the front door of the basement, apartment, and opened it slowly. Standing there was Mrs. Holloway, the landlady's sister who lived 2 streets down. Her wiry gray hair was tucked neatly under a scarf, and her hands trembled slightly around a folded newspaper. I didn't want to intrude. She said in a voice low like the wind before a storm, "But I thought you might want to see this." I took the newspaper, puzzled. My eyes scanned the headline. Missing since 2001, cold case reopened after anonymous tip. A photo stared back at me. A younger version of Mama, with tired eyes and a small child on her lap. Me. The article was about a string of disappearances of women from our old neighborhood, and Mama's name was now included. The world seemed to narrow around me. My knees wobbled. "I thought your Mama died of illness," Mrs. Holloway whispered, eyes searching mine. "That's what I was told," I replied, voice hoarse. "Cancer. She got sick. And one night she just didn't come back from the hospital." Mrs. Holloway shook her head slowly. There was never a funeral, no obituary, and no one saw a body. I always thought it was strange. I looked down at the article again, at the small caption beneath our picture. Linda Carter was last seen leaving her workplace, Pinebrook Diner, in early fall of 2001. She never arrived home. Her daughter, age 5 at the time, was later adopted by extended family. But that wasn't true. I had never been adopted. I had bounced between relatives, foster homes, halfway houses. My memories of that time were a blur of cigarette smoke, plastic-covered, couches, and screaming behind closed doors. I thanked Mrs. Holloway and closed the door. The article clutched to my chest like it might dissolve if I let go. I sat on the bed, breathing heavily. Had Mama been taken? Was she sick at all? That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every passing car made my heart leap. My brain reeled with memories, or the absence of them. I tried to remember the last night I saw her, but it was hazy. I remembered coloring on the kitchen floor, I remembered music playing. Then, nothing. I had to know the truth. The next morning, I took the bus to the Pinebrook Diner, stepping. Inside was like walking into a memory bubble, one I didn't know I still had. The red vinyl booths, the smell of bacon and floor cleaner. The bell above the door still jingled the same way. Behind the counter, a man in his 60s looked up. His name tag said Ben. "Coffee?" he asked. "Actually," I said, unfolding the newspaper and placing it on the counter. "I was wondering if you knew her." He leaned closer. When his eyes met the photo, his entire body stiffened. A flicker of something, recognition, fear, maybe even guilt, passed through him. Before he quickly masked it, "Linda," he said quietly. "Yeah. I remember her. What happened to her?" I asked. Ben looked around nervously and gestured for me to follow him into the back. "I shouldn't be talking about this," he whispered once the swinging kitchen doors closed behind us. "But Linda was special. She always stayed late. Took extra shifts. She'd talk about you all the time." "What happened the night she disappeared?" He swallowed. "There was a man who used to wait for her outside. Never came in, just sat in a black car. Linda told us it was a relative, said he helped her out sometimes. But one night she looked scared. She clocked out like usual, but never came back. Did you tell the police?" He nodded. "They questioned all of us, but there was no proof of anything. Her file was closed after a few months. Do you remember what the man looked like? The car?" Ben hesitated. "I only saw him once. Dark suit, bald, sunglasses. Even at night. The car was a black Lincoln, I think. No plates." A chill danced up my spine. "Why are you asking now?" he said. "After all these years," I showed him the article. "Someone gave them an anonymous tip. I don't think she died of cancer. I think someone made her disappear." Ben looked pale. "If that's true, be careful. Whoever did this might still be watching." I spent the next week digging. Library records, newspaper archives, even visiting the old Department of Social Services to ask for my childhood file. Most of it was redacted, names blacked out, dates missing. But a pattern emerged. There were 3 other women who had worked at the Pinebrook Diner around the same time as Mama. All of them disappeared within 2 years. All were single mothers. All lived in low-income housing. And none of their cases were solved. I found an old friend of Mama's, Carla, through a Facebook group. She agreed to meet at a coffee shop. She used to be terrified of someone, Carla told me over a cup of lukewarm tea. She never told me his name, just that he owned too many people. Said he knew things about her past, about you, and could ruin everything. What did she mean? Carla shook her head. I think he blackmailed her. And when she tried to break away, he made her disappear. I asked Carla to describe the man. Her description matched Ben's. Bald, always in black. Cold. Eyes. Then she leaned closer. Before she vanished, Linda gave me something. Made him told me to keep it safe in case anything happened. I never opened it. Kept it all these years. She handed me a small, rusted tin box. I opened it right there. Inside were photographs, receipts, letters, all with names I didn't recognize. And at the bottom, a cassette tape labeled "In Case of Emergency." My fingers trembled. Mama had left breadcrumbs. She had tried to protect me, even from the shadows. Now the truth was clawing its way to the surface, and I was ready to face it, no matter what it revealed. It started with a knock on the door. Not the usual quiet kind either. It was heavy and emergent even. I was just finishing up folding some laundry when the sound cut through the house, bouncing off the basement walls like a warning bell. For a second, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone had the wrong address. But then it came again, stronger. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart thumping like it always did when something unexpected happened. Wasn't used to surprises anymore, not good ones anyway. When I opened the door, a tall man in a dark coat stood on the porch. He was neatly dressed, polished even. And he wasn't alone to others. One a woman with a clipboard, and the other a younger man with a camera. Slung over his shoulder, flanked him. Mae Carter. The man asked with a tight smile. I hesitated. Yes. He reached into his coat and pulled out a badge. My name is David Klein. I'm with Westfield Legal and Trust. We represent the estate of Mr. Howard Bell. The name rang in my ears like a dropped wine glass. Howard Bell, the man I used to know. No, the man I used to serve pie and coffee to every Thursday morning. The one with the thick mustache, the worn notebook, and the strange habit of always paying an exact change down. To the penny. I haven't heard that name in years, I murmured. He passed away last month, Klein said gently. And in his will, well, he left you something. The words didn't register at first. My mind jumped to maybe an old record player, a stack of books, or some diner memorabilia. That was the kind of thing that happened in movies not real. Life. But David motioned to the woman beside him, who opened a folder and turned it around. There it was, in black and white. My name, in a legal will, next to a figure so staggering I thought my eyes were deceiving me. Dollar. 100 million point oh oh $100 million. My knees went weak. I had to grab the door frame to keep from falling over. There must be some mistake, I whispered. There's no mistake, ma'am, David said. Mr. Bell was extremely private, but very intentional. He left you this sum as a personal gift. Citing, he flipped through some notes. Kindness, consistency, and humanity during the years when no one else saw him. Tears stung my eyes. I hadn't cried in front of strangers in years, but something cracked open inside me. I remembered Howard's quiet demeanor. How he always sat at the same booth in the corner of the diner, scribbling into that little notebook. We never talked. Much. But I always gave him a warm smile, an extra scoop of whipped cream, and called him darlin'. That's all it had taken? David's voice brought me back to the moment. The press may get wind of this once the estate clears probate. We recommend you retain legal counsel and a financial advisor immediately. We can assist with recommendations, or you're free to choose your own. I nodded blankly. The words didn't feel real yet. When they left, I shut the door and slid down to the floor, burying my face in my hands. The basement walls around me suddenly felt surreal. I'd lived in this place with its cracked tiles and dusty corners for so long, I couldn't imagine anything else. And now, everything was different. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, the paperwork clutched. To my chest, my mind was a cyclone. What if it was a hoax? What if someone came and said it was all a mistake? But it wasn't. I called a lawyer the next morning, then a banker, and another lawyer, just to be sure. Each of them confirmed the same thing. The money was real. The inheritance was real. And Mae Carter, waitress, widow, and woman who hadn't owned a new pair of shoes in a decade, is about to become a millionaire 100 times over. The news broke 3 days later. It started as a whisper, online a story buried on a local news site. But once the word millionaire waitress hit social media, the story exploded like wildfire. I woke up to hundreds of messages, voicemails, even news vans parked outside the tiny gate of the house. People shouting questions, some asking for interviews, others just hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who'd served pie and coffee to a secret. Billionaire reporters dubbed it the Pie Lady's Fortune. Others called me the most humble millionaire in America. But behind the headlines, I was still me, still trying to understand how kindness turned into something this big. I refused to move. At least not yet. Everyone expected I'd buy a mansion or disappear to some fancy resort. But I stayed in the basement for a little longer. I needed time to think, to process, to breathe. But I did buy one thing, a bouquet of yellow lilies. The kind Howard always left behind at the end of the booth. I placed them at the edge of the old diner, now closed down, and sat quietly for a while, thinking of all the Thursday mornings we never knew would mean so much. Then came the letters, hundreds of them, some from strangers, telling me how my story gave them hope. Others asking for help money, jobs, medical bills, and a few from people I hadn't heard from in years. People who'd once judged me. Ghosts from high school. Distant cousins. My landlord, who suddenly remembered I was like family. I didn't respond to most, not yet. I was still trying to understand how to be the same person, with a life that looked nothing like it used to, and maybe that's what scared me the most. Because with money this big, people change. Stories change. And sometimes, people get lost in the glitter of it all. I didn't want that. I just wanted to keep being me, the woman who smiled at lonely customers, the woman who found joy in hot tea and small blessings, the woman Howard Bell once saw when no one else did. The heater had died again. That old rattling box in the corner of the basement gave out one last cough of lukewarm air before falling silent. I sat there in the middle of the room, hugging my knees, wrapped in every blanket I could find, staring at the flickering shadows dancing on the walls from a single flickering candle. This was my home now, not by choice, but by survival. But tonight, something felt different, heavier, like a shift in the air, the kind that makes your skin crawl before anything actually happens. From upstairs, I heard the sound of movement, slow, scraping footsteps on the floor above. At first, I thought maybe it was the landlord, or maybe a rat. But these steps had intention, rhythm. Held my breath, step, pause, step, pause. It stopped at the top of the basement stairs. A long silence followed, stretching so thin I felt it might snap. Then came the creak, the unmistakable whine of the basement door as it opened. Just a crack. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just stared at that narrow gap of darkness, heart thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. There was no reason anyone should be up there. Not at this hour, not unless. A memory slammed into me like a freight train. When I was a kid, my mom used to say, "Some monsters don't come with claws. They come dressed in kind faces and soft voices." And tonight, I didn't know which one was coming down those stairs, but I knew something was. The first stair creaked. I whispered to myself, over and over, like a broken record, "It's just a pipe, just a pipe, just another step." No, this wasn't plumbing. This was deliberate. I sprang up and grabbed the broomstick I kept near my mattress. It wasn't much, but it was something. The stairs continued to creak, one at a time, and then I saw it. A hand, long bony fingers wrapped around the railing. No sound, just that hand, followed by the slow reveal of a figure in the dark. Its face half in shadow wasn't monstrous. In fact, that's what made it worse. It looked human, but something about it wasn't right. Its eyes never blinked. Its skin was stretched too tight across its skull. It didn't walk, it glided like it was. Floating an inch above the steps, I was frozen. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. Then it spoke. Not with words, not out loud, but inside my mind, a voice like dripping tar. "You've been feeding me for months." I backed up until I hit the wall. "What do you want?" I whispered. "More. Of you." The shadows pulsed. My candle flickered violently and then went out. Pitch darkness. I screamed. Or at least, I think I did. But no sound came out. Only silence. And in that silence, the monster came closer. Every regret I had, every moment I had cursed my life. Every time I told myself I wasn't enough fed on all of it. That's what it meant. This thing was me. The broken parts, the fears, the self-loathing it had taken shape in the silence of the basement. Nurtured by my darkest thoughts, I closed my eyes and pressed my back to the wall. "You don't get to win," I said aloud, through clenched teeth. Not tonight. Something shifted. A tiny burst of warmth ignited in my chest. It wasn't much, but it was me, the real me, the one who had survived every bad day up to this point. It's the one who scraped by, even when there was nothing left to. Scraped that flicker of self-belief. It was enough. The darkness shrieked, not loud, but like a wind screaming through a crack in the earth. Just like that, it vanished. The candle reignited on its own, and the basement was quiet again. I don't know if what I saw was real. Maybe it was a hallucination brought on by stress, cold, and too little sleep. Or maybe the house really was haunted by something dark, something that only preyed on the broken. But one thing I knew for sure, that night, I had faced something worse than poverty, worse than loneliness. I had faced myself, or at least the ugliest version of me, and I had not let it win. Not entirely. I sat down slowly on the mattress, still shaking. I pulled the blankets tighter and reached into the pocket of my hoodie. There, I found the little stone charm Linda had given me, the one she said brought her peace. Just touching it steadied my breathing. Tomorrow, I whispered to no one. I'll do better. It's just one step. The monsters would return. I knew that. But so would I. The wood-paneled courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, but emotionally quiet, tense, sterile. Every shuffle of paper echoed. Every cough or throat clearing cut through the silence like a blade. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands trembling slightly as I stared at the polished surface, my reflection staring back, weary but defiant. It had been months in the making. Years of emotional buildup, and now we were here. The trial against Aaron, my ex-husband, the man who once promised me the world, and then tried to destroy it. He sat across the room at the defense table, looking indifferent, detached even. His new lawyer, slick young and overly confident, whispered something to him, and Aaron gave a faint smirk. I looked away. I couldn't waste energy on his face. Today wasn't about him. It was about truth. It was about justice. It was about healing. My attorney, a calm and composed woman named Janet, leaned over and gave me a reassuring pat on the hand. You ready? I wasn't, but I nodded, as ready as I'll ever be. The judge entered, and everyone rose. My knees felt like they would give out, but I stood, chin up. I had made it this far. I wouldn't break now. The first part of the trial was procedural, establishing timelines, financial documents, communication records, and custody arrangements. Aaron's side painted the usual picture: an unstable ex-wife, a man simply trying to move on, and disputes blown out of proportion. But then it was my turn. I took the stand. The bailiff asked me to raise my right hand and swear the oath. My voice cracked slightly as I said, I do, but it didn't shake. I sat down and faced a courtroom full of strangers, each ready to pass judgment, some literally. Janet stood before me, her voice gentle but clear. Can you please state your name for the record? Name for the record? Mae Carter. Emma, can you tell the court what brought you here today? I looked at the jury. Their faces were blank, unreadable. I took a breath. I'm here because I was silenced for years, because I lost my home, my dignity. It almost lost my children, because I want to be heard for the first time. I recounted the events, the manipulation, emotional abuse, the sudden freezing of bank accounts, the threats that if I ever spoke out, I'd lose everything. I spoke of the morning I found myself with no money, no car, and 2 terrified children staring at me, waiting for answers I didn't have. I shared what it felt like to sleep in a basement, to dig through couches for change, to wash clothes in. The sink I described the weight of shame, the nights I stayed awake, counting every dollar and every tear. I didn't cry while testifying. Not once. I had done enough crying. Today I was steel. The defense tried to paint me as unstable. Brought up old texts where I'd sounded angry, confused, desperate. They twisted my words, questioned my parenting, even implied that I'd exaggerated everything, but I didn't flinch. Janet stood and objected with precision. When it was her turn to redirect, she brought the humanity back into the courtroom. She played a voicemail from Aaron, the one where he threatened to take the kids if I ever tried to leave. The jury heard his voice, laced with venom. A collective shift happened then. They heard him as I had heard him, not as a charming businessman, but as a controlling man who hid cruelty behind calm words. Later that day, Aaron took the stand. He lied. He said I'd always been difficult, overly emotional, said I fabricated stories. She was never satisfied, he claimed. No matter what I provided, it was never enough for Emma. Janet stood during cross-examination. Did you, or did you not, transfer over $60,000 from the joint account into a private on 2 weeks before initiating divorce proceedings? Aaron shifted. I had financial concerns. It was for protection. Protection from what? Your wife, the mother of your children? He paused. Janet turned to the judge. Your Honor, let the record show the defendant avoided a direct answer. It went on like that for days. Witnesses came forward. Friends testified. A former employee of Aaron's bravely revealed. She'd been asked to fabricate emails for court. The tide was turning. Then came the final day. Closing statements. Janet stood and delivered a speech that brought the courtroom to silence. This is not about a bitter breakup, she said. It's not about he said, she said. It's about a woman who was pushed to the edge financially, emotionally, mentally, and fought her way back with nothing but grit and love for her children. It's about justice, not just for Emma. For every woman who's ever been told to sit down, stay quiet, and accept less than what is right. I felt my throat tighten. Aaron's lawyer gave his final statement too, polished, technical, cold, but I could feel the difference in the room. I wasn't just heard, I was felt. We waited. The jury took 2 days to deliberate. I tried to go about life, make breakfast, pack school lunches, go for walks, but everything felt suspended in that courtroom. Then the call came. The verdict was in. I sat with Janet in the same courtroom, heart pounding. All rise, the bailiff announced. The jury filed in, the foreperson stood. My breath caught in my throat, in the matter of financial fraud, emotional abuse, and custody. Interference, she began. We find in favor of the plaintiff, Emma Carter. I didn't move. Janet placed her hand on mine. You did it. The judge awarded me full custody, financial compensation, and most importantly, a restraining order. My name had been cleared. My voice had mattered. Tears finally fell, silent and warm. But these were not the tears of defeat. These were tears of victory. Tears of a woman who had survived her own courtroom battle and won. The courtroom had fallen into a hush, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The jury had been out for only 4 hours, but to me it felt like an eternity. My palms were clammy, clutching the worn sleeve of Aunt Dee's cardigan beside me. She didn't speak, just sat solidly by my side like a pillar, unmoving, calm, and unwavering. When the doors creaked open and the jury filed in, I could barely lift my gaze. My heartbeat pulsed in my ears like a drum. I caught a glimpse of Amanda from across the aisle. She didn't look back at me. Her jaw was clenched, her makeup hiding the shadows under her eyes. Her parents sat stiffly behind her, while my own section of benches held only Aunt Dee and one neighbor who used to bring over banana bread when Mom was alive. All rise. The bailiff called, the judge entered, and nodded for us to sit. Has the jury reached a verdict? She asked. The foreman, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, stood. We have, Your Honor. I couldn't breathe. In the matter of the State versus Gregory Jameson, on the charge of assault in the 3rd degree, we find the defendant guilty. The air was knocked out of me. A cry escaped my throat before I could stop it, a choked sound that was half sob, half disbelief. Aunt Dee's hand found mine, tight and trembling. I looked up at the judge, at the jury, at Amanda. Then I cried openly, because after all the pain, all the doubt, all the shame, I was finally heard. It didn't stop the ache. It didn't rewind time, but it mattered. It mattered. Gregory, seated across from me, didn't flinch. He simply stared forward, as if this verdict had never applied to him. But I saw the twitch in his jaw, the way his knuckles whitened against the table. For the first time, the mask cracked. The judge continued with sentencing procedures, but I barely heard them. 1 year probation, mandatory therapy, a restraining order. It wasn't enough not for the wounds I carried, but it was more than most girls like me ever got. Afterwards, in the courthouse lobby, reporters with cameras buzzed around like flies. I ducked my head, not ready to be a face on TV. Aunt Dee shielded me with her arm as we slipped out through a side door and into the parking lot. The sunlight felt foreign to bright, to clean, like the world had the nerve to keep turning while I was unraveling inside. Aunt Dee stopped beside her old minivan and turned to me. You did it, baby, she whispered. I shook my head. No, we did. She smiled, tears in her eyes. You were brave enough to tell the truth. That's everything. I didn't feel brave. I felt wrung out, hollow. But under that, there was a strange warmth growing, hope. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel dirty. I didn't feel like a secret. I felt human, whole. The weeks after the verdict passed in a haze of quiet healing. I started therapeutic therapy with a woman named Carla who never once looked at me with pity. She had short, silver hair and a laugh like a crackling fireplace. She didn't push. She just waited. And eventually, I began to talk about the night it happened, about the mornings after, about my nightmares, and the way the ceiling in the basement seemed to bend inward when I cried too hard. Carla taught me how to breathe again. She helped me understand that trauma wasn't something you just got over. It was something you carried, but that didn't mean it had to define you. You are not what happened to you. She said one afternoon as I clutched a pillow on her couch, "You are who you choose to become." I let those words sink in. I didn't have to be the girl in the basement forever. I started painting again. Just little things, doodles, sketches, watercolors. First my hands trembled, but then I remembered how Mom used to say that the brush could tell your story when words couldn't, and so I let it. Blue sky, a storm cloud, a girl standing barefoot in the rain, every color. Every line it was like my soul exhaling. One afternoon I brought one of my paintings to Carla. She studied it for a long time before speaking. "She looks free," she said softly. "She's trying to be," I replied. School didn't start again for me until the following semester, and even then, it was part-time. But when I returned, I held my head a little higher. Some kids whispered. Others stared. Few came up to me with soft apologies or awkward support. I didn't expect their kindness, but I accepted it. It's not because I needed their approval, but because I finally understood that I didn't need to hide. One girl, Sarah Jr. I used to eat lunch with, passed me a note during study hall. It read, "You speaking out gave me the courage to tell my mom about my uncle." "Thank you," I cried. In the bathroom stall after reading it, I wasn't alone. None of us were. We just needed someone to go first. One evening, months after the verdict, Aunt Dee and I sat on the back porch watching fireflies blink across the lawn. "You ever wonder what Mom would say?" I asked her, voice low. Aunt Dee looked up at the stars. "She'd say she was proud of you, that you're stronger than anyone she ever knew." I smiled through tears. "Do you think she sees me?" "Oh, honey," Aunt Dee whispered. She never stopped. As the summer sun set behind the trees, and the night filled with crickets and the scent of earth after rain, I felt a strange peace settle in my chest. The journey wasn't over. Some days still hurt. The shadows still came. But now I had a light, and more importantly, I had myself. I was not broken. I was becoming. The sun filtered through the basement window in long golden streaks, painting soft patterns on the walls. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't wake up with a knot in my chest. There was still pain, yes, and the occasional tremor of fear, but there was also peace, fragile, like morning dew, but real. The trial was over. Justice had been served. The monsters had names now, and faces that no longer haunted me in silence. They were behind bars, where they could no longer harm anyone else. I stretched on the little cot that had been my home for too long. The blanket still carried the scent of lavender from Clara's wash. She had snuck down 2 nights ago, after the verdict, wrapped me in the biggest hug, and said nothing. Just sat beside me while we listened to the rain tapping against the ground-level window. I owed her more than I could say, but the real weight lifted when I received a small envelope the next day. A check from the state restitution, enough to move into my own place, enough to breathe. Not enough to erase what happened, but a sign that someone, somewhere, believed I deserved better. I spent the morning packing what little I owned, a stack of books, the donated coat from the shelter, the tiny potted plant Clara had given me on my birthday, stubborn little succulent that somehow kept thriving, even in the dim basement light. Kind of like me, I thought with a soft smile. By noon, I was standing in front of a tiny studio apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't much paint peeling near the corners, a heater that wheezed louder than it warmed, but it was mine. No more curfews, no more damp walls, no more muffled cries in the middle of the night. I stepped inside and set the box of belongings. Down on the floor, it echoed a hollow sound, but it also felt like the first page of a blank journal. The neighbor, a woman in her 50s, with wild gray curls and paint-stained overalls, poked her head out of her door. "You the new girl?" I nodded. "Yeah, just moved in." She eyed me kindly. "Well, if you ever need anything, tools, sugar, someone to scream into the void with apartment to be." "I'm Fran." I laughed. It's an actual full laugh. "Thanks, Fran. I just might take you up on that." The following weeks passed like a gentle stream. I got a job at a small bookstore downtown, known by a man named Theo who had one hand and the kindest heart. He didn't ask questions when I hesitated to shake his hand during the interview. Didn't flinch when I mentioned gaps in my resume. He simply said, "Everyone's got a story. Yours isn't my business unless you want it to be." I worked mornings mostly, sorting new arrivals, organizing displays, chatting with elderly readers about the latest cozy mystery novels. Every time someone smiled at me without expecting anything in return, I felt a little bit of my soul stitching itself back together at night. I'd write journals filled with memories, fears, fragments of who I used to be. I didn't know if I was writing to heal or simply to remember that I had survived. Maybe both. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I danced in my little apartment to music so loud the walls shook. Healing was never a straight line, but it was mine. One afternoon, while wiping down the counter at the store, a little girl came in with her father. She was maybe 6 wide brown eyes, curly hair, and twin puffs. She wandered over to the children's section and pulled a book off the shelf. Her fingers traced the cover gently. "That one's my favorite," I said, kneeling beside her. "The dragon learns how to speak with flowers instead of fire." She blinked at me. "Do you talk to flowers too?" I smiled. "Not yet. But I'm learning." Her dad called her to the register, and as she skipped away, she turned and waved at me. It's just a small gesture, but I felt it deep in my chest. That evening, I walked home slowly, letting the sun warm my face. It was almost spring, and tiny buds were peeking out from between cracks in the sidewalk. Life, always finding a way. Clara visited me a week later, bringing cinnamon buns and her soft laugh. She marveled at my studio, even helped me hang a tiny canvas I'd painted just swirls of color and light. "I'm proud of you," she said over tea. "You got out. You chose life." I looked at her, eyes misting. "I couldn't have done it without you," she shrugged, brushing it off. But I saw the emotion in her eyes. "I'll always be one call away," she whispered. "No matter what." Sometimes I still woke up afraid. Shadows on the wall, the sound of footsteps. The past doesn't leave you overnight, but now I had light to chase it away. I had hope. And more than that, I had choice. The world outside was loud and imperfect, but it was also filled with books, and music and kind strangers. With Fran's cookies and Theo's quiet encouragement, with little girls who believed dragons could learn to speak with flowers, it was filled with me surviving, healing, growing. As I stood by the window that night, sipping warm tea and watching the stars blink into view, I whispered into the quiet, "I'm still here." And for the first time, the silence didn't scare me. It embraced me. This was my new dawn. The sun rose gently, spilling golden light across the kitchen floor like a soft blessing. I stood there, barefoot, in the little kitchen of our Pine Brook. Home stirring coffee as the scent of cinnamon toast wafted through the air. It was the kind of morning I used to dream about, peaceful, warm, ordinary. And after everything, ordinary felt like a miracle. Dylan was still asleep upstairs. He'd had a hard time settling the night before bad dreams, he said. But this morning his breathing was even and soft, and his tiny sneakers were neatly lined up by the door. We had a school visit today, not a foster care meeting, not a courtroom appearance, just a school tour. It's a possible new beginning. I glanced at the picture frame by the window. It held a crayon drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands. Ms. Linda plus me scrawled across the top in blocky letters. Made me smile every time I saw it. There had been a time not long ago. One ago, and I didn't know if either of us would ever feel safe again. 1 month earlier. After the verdict, the courtroom slowly emptied, people dispersing like dust after a storm. My legs felt numb, but Dylan reached for my hand and said quietly, "Can we go now?" And we did. We walked straight out into the light. No more hiding. No more silence. A few reporters shouted questions, but I didn't speak. Not that day. I owed no one an explanation. The truth was now out in the open. The people who hurt Dylan were going to prison. And the boy who once came into the diner with haunted eyes now had a name, a voice, and a future. The weeks that followed were a strange blur. Paperwork, interviews, home inspections. But for once it wasn't about removing him, it was about letting him stay. The day the judge approved guardianship, I didn't cry, I laughed. A full, surprised laugh that startled everyone in the room, including Dylan. Then he laughed too. We went out for pancakes. We didn't talk about the case or the past. Just extra syrup and whipped cream. Quiet celebration. Back to now. I heard soft footsteps padding across the upstairs hallway. "Ms. Linda." Dylan's voice was sleepy and small. "In the kitchen, sugar," I called gently. He came down in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes, his hair sticking up like a little wild thing. He looked so much younger when he wasn't guarding himself. "Do I have to wear the shirt with the buttons?" he asked. I chuckled. "Only if you want the principal to think you're a serious scholar." He made a face and reached for his cereal instead. We sat in silence, eating together like we'd done 100 times before. But now, something was different. There was no clock ticking loudly over us, no court dates looming, no caseworkers. Expected just the two of us, a makeshift family. I still had the diner job mornings and afternoons. They'd offered me a better shift. Even started calling me Manager Linda, though no one said it officially. I didn't care about the title. I cared that I could walk in each day and feel proud. Not just because I worked hard, but because when I locked up at night, I came home to someone who waited for me. Dylan looked up from his bowl suddenly. "Hey, do you think we'll ever move out of the basement?" Smiled at that. "One step at a time, baby." The truth was I'd started dreaming again. Little things. Small 2-bedroom place, maybe, with a porch and a yard. Nothing big. Just ours. He slurped the last of his milk, grinned, and darted upstairs to change. I heard drawers opening and closing, the thud of feet as he hopped trying to pull on jeans. The normal chaos of a kid getting ready for a normal day, and I let myself breathe. Not everything was perfect. He still flinched at loud voices. I still had nightmares now and then. But healing was like the seasons in Pine Brook slow sometimes. Unexpected, but always moving forward. The last piece of mail I opened that week had been a card. From Grace, she wrote simply, "You saved him. And in a way, you saved me too. Thank you for not staying silent. The world needs more people like you. Love always, G." I stared at it for a long time before setting it on the windowsill next to the crayon drawing. I didn't need recognition, but it warmed something deep inside me to know Grace was okay. She had gone back to school, started a podcast to help other survivors, and was finally living on her own terms. As for Shaq, no one had seen him since the trial. Stump said he moved out of state. Others whispered about new ventures, far from Pine Brook. It didn't matter. His shadow no longer touched us. The car horn outside broke my thoughts. Dylan came running, backpack slung over one shoulder. "You ready, champ?" I asked. He nodded, then paused. "Hey, Ms. Linda." "Yes, baby. Thanks for not giving up on me." My throat tightened, but I managed to smile. Always. He climbed into the car, and I watched it drive off, his little hand waving. From the back window, and as the morning sun crept higher, I stepped outside, breathed in the fresh Pine Brook air, and whispered to the wind, "We made it. The end. The end."